Welcome to the Newsmakers Podcast. I'm Billy Hollowell, and this is a show where we go behind the headlines every day to bring you an interview with a pastor, entertainer, politician, or other notable news figure. And this is a show, again, it's daily, but it's based on our weekly TV show, which is also called Newsmakers. You can watch it on the CBN News channel and also on our YouTube page. And on this show, every day, we dive deep. It's a little more longer form with one of the people who you will often see on our Newsmakers show or across the CBN News platforms. On today's Newsmakers, we're talking about the case of an Arizona church that is claiming that a local government is blocking its pastor from feeding the poor. This is Gethsemani Baptist Church. They have retained First Liberty Institute, and we're going to be talking with Jeremy Dice in just a moment about the complaint that has been filed, as well as a request for a preliminary injunction. We'll get into all of that and what is actually at the center of this dispute. That and more as we welcome Jeremy Dice here to Newsmakers. Now, Jeremy, you have filed a complaint on behalf of a church out in Arizona over the claim that the government is preventing that church from giving food to the poor. Can you take us through what's going on here?
Yeah, this is a little Baptist church, Gethsemani Baptist Church, right on the border in San Luis, Arizona. In fact, it's probably, a par 5 away from the famous border wall there in Arizona. And here's a church that has, for the last 25 or 30 years, been present in that community and caring for its people by handing them food when they need it. And not just the city of San Luis, but people throughout the entire region, which are in desperate need of food at times, ranging all the way from San Luis up to Tucson and around that entire area. And people that are coming across the border often stop there on the way into the country, again, in great need for this food. And on top of all that, you have churches in Mexico that regularly cross the border, stop at the church, fill up a pickup truck worth of food, and go back into Mexico and feed churches and people there in Mexico. So to say that this church is having a massive regional impact, feeding the hungry in its area, would be absolutely correct and probably an understatement. But only recently has Mayor Riddell there in San Luis become opposed to the efforts of this church to care for those in their community.
Well, let's talk about that because you mentioned 25 years going back to 1999, I believe, when this started, and they've been doing this. And according to the pastor of that church, they've in fact even had moments purportedly of the government being involved, people involved in city council helping hand out food during the pandemic, those sorts of things. So it seemed like there was a partnership of sorts, or at least a favorability on behalf of the city towards this church at some point. Did something change? Was the church, something the church was doing in terms of how they handed the food out change? What perpetuated that shift?
Well, the church has done what it has always done. And so there's really been no change on the end of the church. They've just been simply trying to care for people in their community. What changed, it seems, is the mayor. Mayor Riddell was elected to office and very promptly kicked the church out of the city's warehouses. They had been using their warehouses for storage of food until they could move it to their property to hand it out. And all friendly relationships between the city and this church seemed to cool real quick when she became the mayor there. And for reasons I'm still not entirely sure. Now, they say it's because the pastor brings a semi-truck into the community with this food to unload it and to hand it all out. And that's been true, of course. Now, the ordinances in the town actually permit trucks to be able to be on that property for a period of time to unload off their property. But that's perfectly fine. That's when they're on the side of the road. The church has actually pulled that truck onto their own property, which shouldn't be an issue at all. But even now bringing that truck into the church property or onto the property or even on the side of the road, which the law allows, is forbidden by the city. In fact, they have now ticketed him twice for even having a truck pass by, even for 5 minutes outside of their church property. Now, you need to understand that just down the street, there are 2 Head Start programs. These are programs by the federal government to help out students in schools. They have a weekly delivery by semi-truck of food to those Head Start programs, and those trucks are perfectly fine and being permitted by the city to be there. It's only this church that is being singled out, ticketed, and fined for trying to feed the hungry.
So just to clarify this, they would be allowed to have the truck on the road, on the side of the church. They're not allowed to have the trucks on the property of the church.
I know it gets a little confusing. It should be just fine to have the truck on their own property, but they've been trying to be good neighbors and make sure that everybody's happy with things there. So they were wanting the ability just to go onto the side of the road, unload the food, and move the truck. They have under their ordinances, they have a 2 to 3 hour window where they can do that very thing. And this is common sense, right? If you get a furniture delivery or you're moving your home or whatever it might be, you need to have a truck to have access to your property. And so they make those kinds of exceptions. They make that exception for the Head Start program. They will not make that exception for the church. And instead, they are penalizing this church with fines for doing so.
And to go back to the original point, this has apparently been going on for 25 years without an issue until this point. I know last August there was some sort of incident with a truck in a wall, I believe, in the neighborhood, but it was repaired after. Is that something that might have sparked this, just frustration over maybe the truck creating some sort of damage again, which from what I understand was repaired?
Yeah, it's an unfortunate situation where the pastor who was driving the truck got a metal splinter in his eye and got out of the truck and forgot to set the brake properly, and it just creeped forward and ran into a gate across the street. The pastor was embarrassed and saddened and frustrated by the entire thing. And out of very little funds that they had, they paid to restore that fence, made it a much nicer fence than what was in there before. So all that's been fine. Perhaps that is where sort of the conflict began within the community. I don't know. But certainly, if that's needed to be fixed, it's been fixed. And if that was an issue, it shouldn't be an issue anymore. If they could just simply park on the side of the street, unload the truck, and move on. This shouldn't be an issue at all. Their ordinances allow them to do that very thing. But the city, within minutes of a truck arriving at a church, has police officers. Let me give you an example of what I mean by that. Just a couple of weeks ago, just as we were filing this complaint, the pastor had a delivery of food coming to the church, and he made clear to that truck driver, do not come to the church. Make sure you go to this address over here where trucks are allowed. The truck driver, by mistake, came to the church. It was there for no more than 5 minutes, and it left. And as the truck is pulling away, 2 police cruisers come up, as well as a code enforcer, show up at the church's property and ticket not the truck driver. They ticket the pastor for having the truck there on the property. This can only mean one thing, that the city is very much opposed to the efforts of Gethsemani Baptist Church to feed the hungry and allow even the fleeting presence of a semi-truck to unload food for that service.
Yeah, you look at this story and you're describing a situation in which there's obviously a lot of need in this county, in this area, which is why this church has been doing this. I read that the church gives out enough food to cover up to 200 people sometimes in one shot. So there's a lot of people in need. They're serving those people. Now, I want to talk about 2 things. The first, just going back to the fact they've had 2 tickets. How much were those tickets, A? And then B, obviously, I would imagine some people might just say, well, just keep ticketing me. Talk about why that might be problematic in this particular case.
Well, the tickets are no small thing anyway. I think they're $500 a piece right now, and they would have escalating expenses if you keep on having them. By the way, those tickets also include citations for unpermitted work on the building. Well, that's sort of funny because the unpermitted work they're talking about has been there for almost 30 years. Why just now is the city so concerned about this work that was not permitted 30 years ago? Again, I think this reveals the hostility by Mayor Rydell in the San Luis community there to target particularly this pastor for her ire. But even regardless of that, they've now been cited twice for these violations of unpermitted work, but as well as this truck presence. If they're cited one more time, that then becomes a criminal misdemeanor charge against the pastor and will continue to be more misdemeanors that will add up over time and pose a real problem. Really, because of these citations, in fearing a more expensive citation, more misdemeanors being added against him, the church has been forced to suspend their ministry until this lawsuit resolves the problem.
Have the government officials at the center of this given any indication, any reason why, from what you understand, the relationship with the church has changed?
No, not really. I haven't been able to determine exactly why that is the case, other than the fact that the mayor wants it a certain way. and the pastor is called to do something that she doesn't want to have him do at the location in which he's trying to do. Look, all this could clearly be easily resolved. I mean, there is a great need for solving this problem in the area of San Luis, Arizona, as well as in many other parts of the country. This church actually provides food for many food pantries across the region as well. So it's a central hub and ought to be a bright spot in the otherwise bleak area of San Luis, Arizona. But instead of supporting that ministry and finding creative solutions to solve any concerns that may be out there, the mayor has ruled with an iron fist and come down very hard against this pastor in a way that, well, it just doesn't speak well of her relationship with the church.
What is your hope? Obviously, this complaint is happening. The church has paused, which is an important detail here that we've hinted at, but I want to say it again. They've paused their food distribution as this is going on, which I'm sure, again, is impacting a lot of people. What is your hope at the end of this particular lawsuit and complaint?
Well, it's very simple. Our hope is that the church will be able to restore its ministry to feed hungry people in San Luis, Arizona, and beyond. Today, because of Mayor Riddell, there are people that will not have a meal to enjoy this evening because this ministry does not exist. There are people that are very much hurting because this ministry has been forced to suspend itself because the government has told this church how to behave. And that's the real issue here. The First Amendment, federal law, protects churches in their efforts to provide these types of services around the country. And here we have a mayor that is openly defying federal law, saying, no, unless you conform to what I want a church to be like, you can't exist in this way. And you're going to be fined and you're going to face charges, criminal charges, if you don't agree with me. That's the type of behavior that the First Amendment and federal law has been put in place precisely to restrain and make it difficult for these city leaders to do. This could all go away very simply if Mayor Riddell would just simply acknowledge this is a very valuable part of the community and look for good ways to make sure that it continues on into the future.
What is next at this point for those who want to be watching this case, keeping an eye on it? What is the next thing that will happen now that the complaint has been filed?
Yeah, we have filed a complaint. We filed a motion for preliminary injunction seeking to enjoin the city from taking this type of aggressive behavior, allowing this ministry to go forward. So the very next thing to happen is for the city to respond to that complaint and preliminary injunction. And then we'll probably have an argument in front of a judge to find out whether or not the law is going to be applied to this city or not. My hope is that all that becomes unnecessary and Mayor Riddell and the rest of the community there in San Luis recognizes the golden jewel that they have in their community and comes around Gethsemani Baptist Church to support its very important ministry of feeding hungry people rather than singling them out for persecution and fining.
Well, Jeremy, as always, appreciate you taking the time to break this case down for us. Thanks for your time today.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
That's all for today's Newsmakers podcast. Be sure to tune in for the next episode of the show and also head over to the CBN News YouTube channel and the CBN News channel to watch Newsmakers every week. We'll see you soon.